Okay, so good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. It's a pleasure to be learning together again. This is Drisha's Falls Month still. This class is discussion on the Parashah this week with Rabbanit Leah Sarna. Just a reminder, just on how we run the class. You can engage verbally. Just remember to unmute when you would like to speak. And please keep yourself muted when you're not actively speaking so we don't have the background noise and can hear each other well. Also, if you're just joining in now, I'll be sending you an invitation to become a panelist so you can unmute to speak and also show us your lovely face if you wish to. You don't have to. You can also engage in writing on the chat box here on Zoom or as a comment if you are watching us live on Facebook. We are working on Sefer Bereshit, almost all of Sefer Bereshit, and Rabbanit Leah Sarna is with me. She's a member of the faculty and the director of teen programs at Risha. She previously served as director of religious engagement at Anshe Shalom Bnei Israel congregation in Chicago, a leading urban Orthodox congregation. She was ordained at Yeshivat Macharat in 2018, holds a BA from Yale University in philosophy and psychology, and also trained at the SKA, I don't know how to pronounce it, Beit Midrash for Women at Migdal Oz, Drisha in the Center for Modern Torah Leadership. She's been awarded the Pomegranate Prize in Jewish Education by the Covenant Foundation and was a Wexner Graduate Fellow. She has published works that have appeared in The Atlantic, The Washington Post, Lehr House, and the Jewish Review of Books. She also has lectured in Orthodox synagogues and Jewish communal settings around the world and loves spreading her warm, energetic love for Torah and mitzvot with Jews in all stages of life. So with that, I'll turn it to you, Rabbanit Sarna.
Hi, everyone. Very long introduction.
Sorry.
Like give a shortened bio for these things. Anyways, okay. So obviously our hearts and minds are still very much in Israel. And so as some of you might know that I work on like pregnancy, birth, early motherhood. I got a grant to write a book about it, which I'm working on all the time. And so that's just like where my head is all the time. And for me, it's felt very connective on a few fronts, but really like we think about the toll on children of what's going on, both the hostages, all the children who were murdered on October 7th, the children who watch their parents be murdered. I don't know why I said that with like a watch their parents be murdered on October 7th. And then the children who are being used as human shields by Hamas in a horrible, horrible atrocity. Really unthinkable. That to me it's felt very like motivating in my continued work on kind of excavating Jewish tradition and knowledge about these subjects. There's really an incredible amount of material about motherhood, and very few people kind of take the time to learn it because at the time of your life when it's the most kind of obvious to study it, you are instead like learning infant CPR and trying to figure out what stroller you need to buy, and all of that stuff is obviously important and right, and one should do it, but it just means that the Torah that's so like intensely wound up in that period of life gets often skipped over. And so that's what I'm kind of all about these days. I wanted to share some of it with you all today because Rivka, at the beginning of our Parsha, is the only woman in the Torah whose pregnancy is actually described. So we have a lot of women who have a vatahar vateled, like she conceived and then she gave birth without any sense of like pregnancy is in and of itself an experience. We actually have a good number of women in Bereshit who never get pregnant at all. They're just vateled. Somehow they just have babies. That list, includes people who you wouldn't necessarily expect that about, like Zilpah is on that list, like people who it's not just part of a genealogy where you have a woman just giving birth without seemingly any pregnancy at all. And part of the reason why I always think it's very important to point out that the Torah often kind of like elides pregnancy is that today in our cultural conversation, that elision is it gets played out. So in the conversation, let's say about abortion, you'll hear, why get an abortion? Just have the baby and give it up for adoption, as if those two options are basically the same, but one involves death and one involves life, right? Like that's the kind of cultural conversation from the pro-life camp, as if pregnancy is not in and of itself a long, extended, and difficult part of life and human experience. The other place you see it is pregnant people referring to their fetuses as my baby, or referring to their fetus with a name. Oh yeah, this is Frank. And ultrasound technology has really meant that pregnant people can feel very connected in almost like a personhood way to their fetus, whereas before, maybe when you couldn't sort of see it and get to know it in this kind of more visual way, you maybe experienced your fetus more of like an organ in your body. And I think with ultrasound technology and kind of cultural shifts towards naming fetuses, which you don't really see that in at least the observant Jewish community as much, but certainly it's in the water, even for people, my first example about the like elision of pregnancy was coming from a very kind of right-wing camp, and this is much more everywhere. The minute your fetus is named Frank, and its sex, and all of its genetics, and what it looks like, and everything about it, all of a sudden, like, you don't have a pregnancy, you have a baby who's just living on the inside. I think that similarly kind of carries this cultural load of like, pregnancy isn't a thing that is worth like understanding on its own terms, or describing or talking about, because it's not real. Like, there's me and there's this baby, and like that's what it is. Or there's even like, mom and her experience don't matter at all. Once the baby exists, she's just Tupperware that afterwards, you just throw out also. And so it's like in that kind of cultural sort of context that we're living in today, that I think looking at Rivka's pregnancy experience, which is, as I mentioned, for people who are from the start, it's the only pregnancy that's described in the Torah. I think it becomes even more important. And the classical Parshanut, which is what we're going to look at about it, I think it's actually really incredible. So that's what we're going to look at today. And definitely, I just want to welcome, like, we're going to be talking about some kind of hard things, but they're hard things that are extremely common, and that our culture has silenced, and that our mefarshim on Rivka and our Parsha are not quiet about. They're honest about. And I think that's just an incredibly important model, because it's countercultural today. And to talk about really the difficulties of pregnancy. And I don't mean the like, oh, I take up so much space kind of difficulties. I mean like dark, like real serious stuff. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I want to welcome people to chime in. I want to welcome people to share their own experiences if they want, or the experiences of people they know if you want. What I do want to remind you of is that this is recorded and broadcast. So, just even though you're feeling very safe in this environment, I just wanted to like, kind of mention that like at your own risk a little bit, or at least you should know what you're getting yourself into. Yeah, so with that, I think we'll jump in, unless, Fred, did you want to say something? No. Okay. I believe that Evie has put the source sheet into the chat. I'm going to share my screen, and we can look at it together. Okay. So the first thing I want to notice is that Isaac and Rebecca struggled with infertility for 20 years. So when we first start talking about this, V'hi Yitzchak ben 40 shana b'kachto et Rivka bat Betuel Arami. So Isaac gets married to Rebecca when he is 40. And then when the twins are born, V'yitzchak ben shishim shana b'ledet otam. So this period of time that we are going to be looking at today, it's 20, it's 6 psukim long, but it accounts for 20 years in the lives of Yitzchak and Rivka. We know Yitzchak's age. We do not in the text know Rivka's age. I know everyone thinks she got married when she was 3. So obviously it took a long time. And by the way, for her to, over the course of those 20 years, the fact that she didn't have a baby until she was 23, maybe that was a good thing. Okay, so that's like one way to look at it. And that's certainly kind of one narrative possibility here. But I don't think that that's how the Torah wants us to see it necessarily. Like, I think the Torah telling us that this is a 20-year period is meant to elicit pain, right? When we hear Vayetar Yitzchak laHashem lenochach ishto, Isaac pleaded with Hashem on behalf of his wife. That's not meant to be like, oh, it's just 20 years. You're so young. You have plenty of time. Like, no, I think these are 20 years of really suffering for the two of them. And there's lots to say. The Midrashim here about their infertility and how they dealt with it are really beautiful. It's not where I want to go today, but definitely recommended. But then eventually Vayetar lo Hashem, which is so interesting, right? The Vayetar Yitzchak lo Hashem, and then Vayetar lo Hashem. It's like Yitzchak pleaded, and then like God answered his plea, but in the same word. I don't know. There's no good like English play on that, but it's amazing that it's the same word for the calling out and the answering all in one kind of quite intense word. And Rivka becomes pregnant. And here's her experience. Vayitzrutzitzu habanim b'kirba. So part 1, Vayitzrutzitzu. This shoresh of Reish Tzadi Tzadi is somewhat unusual. This is the only place in the Torah that it appears, but it does appear multiple times in the Navi, almost all of them meaning crush. So you have actually examples where it's like emotionally crushing, many examples where it's physically crushing. So you have like skulls that get crushed and shoftim, and that's ratzatz. So it's a very serious word. Like, I think, sometimes you think it's like related to la roots, and it's just like, oh, they're running, and like, and you kind of, people who had active fetuses, maybe. I had one very chill fetus and one extremely like moving all around all the time fetus. And so if that's what you're imagining, I don't think that that's what this word is. I think this word it describes something like much more kind of violent than would ever be normal, and that they're both doing it to each other and that they're doing it to her. I think that's the Vayidratzitzu habanim b'kirba. It's a multi-directional type of crushing that's going on here. And then, so that's part 1. She has this physical experience, and it's very, very bad. And then she has this emotional experience. So, and in order to learn about her emotional experience, we have to listen to what she says. So what she says is, Vatomer im kain lama zeh anochi. If so, why am I? Why is this me? Right? There's a lot of different potential understandings of lama zeh anochi. There's something quite sort of like, I don't mean this like in an insulting way, but almost like inarticulate about it. Like, it's not fully formed. her language. Like she, it's like when someone says a sentence with too many pronouns and you're just not totally sure what they mean by it, but really what it's ultimately expressing is like, I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. I think there's something to that. We're going to see a lot of Parshanut about this, Vatomerim Kain, Lama Zan Ochin, and what that means and what that reflects. But then there's this next phase of the pasuk, which is, it seems like immediately, right? She has this physical feeling, it causes this emotional reaction, and she goes to do something about it. Vatelach lidrosh et Hashem. And it's very important to remember that one pasuk ago, when she had a problem of infertility, and in the Midrash understands, and the Gemara brings this in, that Yitzchak was also infertile, that it was actually like this dual infertility of Yitzchak and Rivka together. But in the pasuk, it's lenochach ishto, right? He's davening for her. And here, like, where's Yitzchak? He got what his prayers were for. Vatar Rivka ishto, and now he's checked out and doesn't care about her experience anymore. Or she's just taking, this is too serious. I'm taking matters into my own hands. Vatelach lidrosh et Hashem. And the other thing that's interesting about this lidrosh et Hashem is that you don't often see amongst the Avod and Imahut someone like asking God a question when they're not already sort of in conversation. So at Bri Ben Abitarim, you have Avraham asking God questions, or once you have the angels already there, Avraham asks questions about Stone, but it's not like Avraham wakes up in the morning and says, today I would like to speak to God. Here are my questions, please. You definitely do see that, let's say, with Moshe. So, and that it's not some like theoretical question. It's like a very like, what is happening to me kind of question, or with a hope for a quite concrete answer. And then also, obviously, at Drisha, we can't pass by the opportunity to just say something about this word, lidrosh, which is, it's to inquire, to ask, but kind of also to demand. Like it's a really strong word. Which was purposeful in the selection of the name for Drisha. Okay. So then she goes to...
Can I say something?
Yeah, please. Hi, Debbie.
It seems to me that she realizes the efficacy of prayer because 20 years had elapsed, and then he prays. We don't hear that he had been praying all along. It's presented as they were married, and then he prays for her, and immediately he's answered because it's in one pasuk there. And so that's like a drastic change. Then she feels this overwhelming sensation inside her. So she feels if it came from God, then God's the address to go to when she's in the midst of this, cataclysmic feeling that she's having. I also think that in those days, it seems to me from the stories of Yaakov and his wives, they didn't talk much about the pregnancy. Like, you're pregnant.
Yeah, we're going to get there actually in a midrash in a second. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. But who's they in your sentence, actually? Is it husbands and wives, or it's people in general?
The women didn't discuss it with their husbands. They named them, the only one he names, I think, is Binyamin. So,
well, no, she names him Ben Oni, and then he gets renamed to silence her experience of labor.
But that it's a woman's thing, it's a Weibishazach, this whole thing of pregnancy and everything. Absolutely. So if she has an issue, she wouldn't go to her husband about it.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe there were mores,
Maybe, but when she goes lidrosh, so in the pasuk, who is she doreshet? She goes lidrosh at Hashem directly. None of the like midrash or parshanut can can like handle that idea, I think. So so it's always like, who did she go talk to? Did she go to Yeshivat Shem Va'Iver? Did she find a Navi? That's always the interpretive move with this, which would then have her presumably speaking to a man, at least Yeshivat Shem Va'Iver. Maybe there's a Neviah that she would go speak to, if you are on team Navi. I
Well, think
personally
of
am on
Eli.
team what?
Excuse me for interrupting you, but think of Eli and Hannah. He also could not comprehend that she would go directly to God.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Other people should also feel welcome to just interrupt, by the way. That's definitely my preferred method here. Zella, do you have something to say?
Yes, my iPad is not correct, so I'm hoping I'm actually speaking to you and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
we're
hear
here.
me. Okay. If it says she went to speak to God, why can't we accept that? Why are we saying she's going to some yeshiva, she's going here, she's going there? She has to speak to a man and have him intercede for her. It clearly says she goes to God. And that's to me part of who she is. She's a very strong person who doesn't fool around and is comfortable saying, this is my life, this is God, let's see what's happening here.
Yeah.
Can I also say something? The whole thing about her being 3, I almost find it offensive. It's just such a people who have had children understand a 3-year-old sometimes can't hold their water. So to say that she's a married woman at 3 is so absurd. And okay, somebody once said it in Midrash, but can we just kind of put that aside for a while?
I think the reason why, I mean, I'm totally on your team. I don't normally I don't teach that as if it's like the truth. I think it's one of those midrashim that just gets stuck in people's like imaginations, maybe because of its perversity in a way. That you kind of, if you don't address it, people just have this 3-year-old like in their mind's eye, in a way that I don't love. And then yeah, I mean the other thing that I would just say is like, we know that there are huge debates over the course of Jewish history. Like we see them play out within the Talmud, and then we see them sort of through the Middle Ages of when is it appropriate to enact a betrothal? Does it provide safety for women, for them to be betrothed very early? Or does that create agunot and it's actually very dangerous? How important is love in a marriage? All kinds of questions like that. And so you sort of wonder whether that midrash is maybe like participating in that dialogue, and then sort of got kind of glommed onto the story in this more.
Yeah, because I mean, she's also the scene at the well where she is actively giving water to the servant and the camels. Again, think of a 3-year-old. It's not real.
I mean, the other thing I would say is like that scene and the scene of the her deciding, her like talking to her family about her decision to go with the servant. And right, Leah, and then their bracha to her, it's all very Avraham, right? So if you look at her giving, I don't know what, I don't think you guys talked about this last week with Rabbi Kelson, but right, it's a lot of Vayarot Vayamaher, which is all Avraham and the angels language. Vayirash Zarchat Shar Sonav is what I think that's her, the bracha to her, and the bracha to Avram is Vayirash Zarchat Shar Oivav. Achutinu at Hiyila Firvava, the Heye bracha, right? It's a lot of Avraham language. And like, how do you look at a 3-year-old girl and see Avram? Or you have an extraordinary 3-year-old girl and she's all Abraham, right? So that's the other way to say it, as like Rivka was so extraordinary that it was obvious from a very young child. Anyways, I want to kind of put the 3-year-old thing to rest, if that's okay with you for the moment.
I had, excuse me, but Zella, I had the same questions, and I had heard one person once say that the reason that it's not to be taken literally, but the idea is that if you have a child from the age of 3, you can really influence them. And that's when they start to accept culture and start to discuss ideas, etc. Before that, there's nobody home to talk to. So they wanted her to be pictured as if she came into Abraham's house and she was able to be absorbed and influenced by his ideas. And that is why it said age 3, not to think that she was literally 3, but it was the mindset that she was then open to accept his way of life and his values. And she grew up there. That was, which struck me as, I can't imagine the Midrash meant it literally. Like when they say somebody's arm is a mile long, they don't mean it means he's powerful. So here, that she was able to absorb to a greater degree the values of Abraham as opposed to those from her, where she was born.
Okay, let's move on from this.
Rabbanit. Oh, okay.
Oh, hey, sorry. Go ahead. Hi.
I'm sorry. No, I've been wondering about this for a long time because I've been doing Daf Yomi, and in the course of doing Daf Yomi is the first time I was introduced to this Talmudic concept of Bat Shalosh Leah, and I was always wondering about the chicken and egg thing. Which came first? Meaning, did they say Rivka was 3 because that was already a principle, or did they make that a principle because of the Midrash that said Rivka was 3? I just thought it just jumped out at me that there would be a connection between those two things,
there's a
but
without question,
I didn't know which came first.
I don't think there's probably no way to know, because like I think our understanding of how Torah Shabbal Peh kind of works is that before any of it was written down, it was kind of like in the water, and so there, you can't look back. My beliefs about Torah Shabbal Peh are such that you can't look back at the written records and come up with an answer about that, because before it was written, it was oral, and then it was, and then we don't have a record. So.
Right. I just didn't know if the Midrash was a later Midrash that may have, come after that, or I was just curious about that.
But there's a Midrash that Isaac was also 3 when he was during the Akedah, so maybe that's what it's coming off of.
Oh, I thought he was 37. Okay, and
right.
So I know you want to put this topic to rest, but it's been bothering me every time we come across that in the Gemara. So I was wondering if it was connected.
I mean, it should bother you for a lot of reasons. Sorry.
Yes, it does. It does. Believe me, I'm learning with Rabbanit Michelle Barber. Yeah. So believe me.
Yeah, she's wonderful about that kind of material.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to look at Rashi. So Rashi also, he's like, what Stam Mahi Ritzitzazu, and why is she, right? So he's like, what is this word, this Ritzitza, and what is Im Kelama Zadochi, right? Like in one pasuk, we just have so many kind of words and phrases that we don't know. And so he says, Rabutinu Drashu Lashon Ritza, but he recognizes that it's a midrash, that our rabbis understood it to be this language of running. So as I said, that seems to clearly not be the pshat of the term is crush, but the rabbis made a midrash on it that it's like running. And then this is kind of that classic midrash that I'm sure people are familiar with, that when Rivka would walk by Pitchei Torah Shel Shem Ve'iver, then when she would walk by the Beit Midrash of Shem and Iver, the doors of Torah environments, Yaakov would run and try and get out, and just hold that image that Rashi's already introducing of them trying to get out. The Bechor Shor is going to say it much more explicitly. So just kind of hold that connection for a second. And when Rivka was overet al petach abudat elilim, Esav mefaresa. Let's see. So when she would walk by a pagan temple, Esav would try and like run out. Davar acher mitrutzitzim za'im za. So another answer, says Rashi, is that this is where we get back to crushing, right? They were crushing each other, umerivim, and they were fighting benachalat shnei ulamot, in that inheritance of two worlds. And you could have an entire shiur on what this inheritance of two worlds is and what we're talking about, but we're just going to put a pin in that for now. And then Vatomer Im Kain. So what is Im Kain? Im Kain is Gadol Tar Ha'ibor. So we said the problem with Rivka's statement is that it's just kind of full of sort of pronouns, like what are these words referring to? So if the suffering of pregnancy is this intense, Lama za anochi doesn't mean why do I exist, but why is it that I wanted to be pregnant? Lama za anochi means aval mit palalet al harayon. If pregnancy is this horrible, why did I want it for so much? So Debbie had put forward this read that, they just davened in 1 minute later, they were pregnant. The Midrash understands that they really spent those 20 years davening for this and really like just dreaming and hoping of a pregnancy for such a very like protracted period. And that read really, fits well with Rashi. Lama zanochi midamamid balad arayerion. I spent 20 years dreaming of this thing, and God, is it horrible? It says Rivka. And so what does she do? Vatilech lidrosh. She goes to the Beit Midrash of shame. In the context of Rashi's like Midrashim that he brings in, that's kind of an interesting thing. Like you want these feelings to end, but you have also noticed that someone's always like going insane when you walk near a Beit Midrash, and then you purposefully go there in order to find out an answer. To me, what it just makes me think of is like, if you have a symptom, you're afraid that by the time you go to the doctor, your symptom won't be there anymore. And then they just like won't believe you, or they won't be able to help you because they can't see what you're talking about. So I always like a little wonder about Rivka, if that's what this is about. Like there's lots of places I could have gone to get help, but like let me go somewhere where for sure this symptom is going to be manifesting. I don't know. Anyways, and then what is she hoping for? Because it seems like Lidrosh Hashem is like maybe to demand help, or like if I were suffering and I went to go lidrosh something, it would be medication. I don't know, it just seems like the most sort of clear thing that she would be wanting. And that is not the way that our Parashah understands it in light of what she gets out of it, which is not medication, and not even, at least on the Pshat level, an end to the Ritzitza, but instead she gets some kind of prophetic clarity about where it's all going. And so Rashi says, yeah, that's what she was hoping for. That he'll tell her, that Hashem will tell her, what will happen in the end. It's like, oh, I'm really suffering in my pregnancy, and someone says, well, it's a boy. Like, that is so not helpful. And that's sort of what this, I think Rashi really like kind of brings out sort of the disjunct between the description of Rivka's experience here and the response that she gets here. And so Rashi smooths it out by saying, oh, this is what she was hoping for. Vatilech lidrosh Hashem, for a prophecy that would make it all make sense. But I do think that the question behind Rashi's answer is as always with Rashi, it's a phenomenal question on the text, which is, was this what she was doreshet? And like, did it help her? Because it doesn't seem like it helps her suffering, really. in any kind of direct way. Like she has a physical and emotional problem, and the answer she gets is philosophical, existential, long-term, something like that. It just doesn't address the symptoms presented, I think. Okay.
Yeah,
So
it makes me think of like he doesn't, the answer she gets is not one of them is going to be like a Moshiach of Yisrael kind of thing, like, with Shimshon's, with the pregnancy of Shimshon's mother. It's just like you're going to have these two warring factions. That's not going to exactly make her feel calmer. She may understand it, but she may have an answer to why it's happening, but it's not an answer that's going to make her feel better. It's not like if she were told you're having twins, but one of them is going to be this most spectacular kid, then you might hold your breath and wait for it to happen.
Totally. That's a really important insight. Okay, I think the Bechor Shor does something creative and interesting with this, where he says, like, what? So first of all, he says, "V'yidrotzitzu lashon kaneh ratzutz," right? That's how I set it up. And v'yidrotzitzu is the same thing as ratzutz here, which means crushed. Mishtabrin, right? They're breaking. And so what's Rivka thinking? V'savra ki chavlei yodahem. She thinks, oh my God, I'm in labor. V'adayin lo higia zman lida, and it's not time yet. V'yar'eh shama hipila, and she's like, oh my God, this pregnancy is not going to stick. I'm having these crushing pains, right? So anyone who's maybe been through it might remember that the difference between your baby kicking, your fetus kicking, even when it kicks hard or even when it kicks some internal organ, the difference between that and labor is very different. Like, even if you experience both as pain, they're just really super different types of pain. But Rivka, A, has never been in labor before, and B, I think she's really experiencing that much more like heavy type of pain that we would normally associate with labor. And so she confuses them, and she says, and she's afraid that she's going to miscarry. Vatomer im kain. So what's the if so? For Rashi, it was, if my suffering is going to be this bad, right? Vatomer im kain gadol tzara ibor. But for the Bechor Shor, it's im kain, if I'm going to miscarry. Lama zeh anochi. Why am I? But what is it about me? Lama zeh anochi hara v'lama kibel Agadosh Baruch Hu tfilatinu lola azor v'lola hoyel. Like, if I'm just gonna miscarry, then why did I even get pregnant in the first place? Why did Hashem seemingly like receive or accept my tefillot, but not actually in a way, like I wasn't just davening to like have the experience of pregnancy. I was davening to, I see Sandra 1 second, I was davening to have a baby at the end of it. And this like, oh, my tefillot were answered because I have a pregnancy that I'm about to lose. Like, this is not the thing that I was hoping for. Yeah, Sandra.
Thank you. I love the Bechor Shor in general, and I think that he's right on point here. And I'd like to suggest something also. When she doesn't say lama zeh, she says lama zeh anochi. So this goes right to the essence of her femaleness. And my thought always was, why did you build me as a female if you're going to withhold from me the most female function that I have, which is to produce a child? And that's what I always thought the lama zeh anochi meant. Because the anochi, you could think, I mean, you could always make the Torah as spare as you possibly could. So if we were to shave off extra words, which is already possible, if we were to say lama zeh, like lama zeh, you'd say, oh, we get it. You'd still have similar questions, because what would the zeh be? But the fact that they put in anochi, it's ineluctable. You can't get away from the fact that it's got to touch right there. It's a needle point touching the essence of being a woman in this nomadic society, because it's the thing. It's the thing that what's the word? Militated her mother, her husband's mother. Everybody's mind is preoccupied by that, and so I think the Lama Ze Anochi really means exactly what you think it is, which is, why am I a female if you're denying me the female essence of what I'm supposed to be?
The Gemara has a midrash on Chana. That's exactly what you're saying. So the pasuk is v'Chana hi medaberet al liba. She's speaking like on her heart. So the Gemara says, what is on her heart? Well, on a woman's heart are her breasts, and so it writes out this whole prayer for Chana, where she's davening for the opportunity to use her breasts, which is exactly
that's
what
wonderful, because
I
that
can
is
send
so
it to you. It's
wonderful.
Incredible.
Because that's what Sarah says when the angels came and said to her, and she overheard it, in a year's time you'll have that. She goes, what? The midrash says, she says, what? And she holds her breast and says, are these tzimukim, are these raisins, these shriveled tzimukim, are these going to produce milk? So I think that the midrashim talk to each other, and the breasts are there for a purpose, just as Rebecca's femaleness is there for a purpose. She's got the womb, she's got the breasts. Sarah had it also. Whether or not she had a womb is actually midrashically in question. But basically, I think that's why I think what the Bechor Shor is saying is so on point.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful read, because then also, so remember, Tuesday, like just before this, we were talking about Rashi's like subtle, he doesn't say it explicitly, but the question of like, the answer doesn't address the motivation of the question, right? The question is like, why am I having this experience? This is horrible, make it stop. And the answer is like, well, there are two nations inside of you. But in the Bechor Shor's understanding,
that's right. It's like, what question are they answering? I love that about Rashi. Wait a minute, what question are they answering? I'm sure that's not what she's asking.
Yeah, Rashi. I mean, Rashi's always amazing. Anyways, but the Bechor Shor, in his reading, where what she's nervous about is not, wow, pregnancy sucks, but I'm losing this pregnancy.
Yes.
Then the answer is, you're not losing this pregnancy. The answer actually does give her calm to what's bothering her, right? So Shnei Goyim B'Vinech, he says, Klomar lo hipalt ki Shnei Goyim mitzu mimach, and Uyamei Laledet lo k'shehayta svura ela haya ba le'et mil'o yamim v'le'et leda. Right? She didn't have her baby when she thought she was going to. Rather, it really held off and until she came to full term and the time for labor. So the question that Rashi sort of is able to answer, but sort of kind of not, the Bechor Shor's read really does a beautiful job of piecing it all together.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I want to go back to the comment someone made before about, well, it seems like people weren't talking about pregnancy, and look at this midrash in Bereshit Rabbah. So the midrash says, "V'tomarim came lama ze anochi." Okay, so she said, if so, why do I exist? Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Mila Michaita Imenu Rivka Machazeret Al Pitchayam Shal Nashim. It teaches that our matriarch Rivka went to the doors of other women, Ve'omeret Lahan, and she said to them, Higia lachem hatar hazeh b'mechem? In kachu tzaro shel banim v'halavai lo hibarti. She said, did this suffering happen to you when you were pregnant? If so, if this is just like normal, I wish I had never become pregnant. Which is just a really fascinating midrash on a few fronts. One is that Rivka assumed that her experience was normal, which is fascinating, and I think brings out this really like important thing about pregnancy, which is your body that you've known and been used to for however many years it was for Rivka, but let's say for someone now, 25 years, 30 years, all of a sudden is doing like crazy town. Everything is different. And so you don't know what normal is, and you don't know what health feels like. And at least like my experience in my first pregnancy was like I would message my doctor's office and like 80% of the time they'd be like, you're normal, everything's fine, you're normal, everything's fine, you're normal, everything's fine. But there's no way to know whether you're normal, everything's fine. Whereas in my non-pregnant, everyday kind of body, if something's wrong, I can tell because I know what normal is. But in pregnancy, you don't know what normal is. And so that's one piece about this that I think is just so interesting. And the other piece about this that I think is sad is that why is it that Rivka has to go around knocking on other people's doors? She thinks what she's experiencing is normal, but she has so few people talking about their experiences of pregnancy that she has to be the brave one. Like this idea also, is anyone familiar with this language of mechazeret al pitchayhem or mechazeret al ptachim?
It's repetitive. It means that it occurred again and again and again. It wasn't a one-shot deal.
Good. And who's the normal person who's mechazer al ptachim? Like in the
Someone
Mishnah,
who
for example.
needs money.
Yeah, this is like beggar language.
Yeah.
So at the end of Kiddushin, for example, when they're deciding, there's only enough money to support like one kid, who gets it and who's gonna beg, that
Right.
it's that type of language. And so it makes her out to be like there's something quite, like with that in the
Pathetic a little bit.
yeah, isolated, pathetic. And it paints a picture of a world with real silence about pregnancy, which is certainly what we see in Tanakh. It's just the vatahar vateled with no story ever told about what those pregnancies were like. And you get this image of Rivka being born into, being pregnant in a world where there was just silence about this experience and her refusing that silence, her banging down the doors to break that silence. Yeah, Sandra.
A question. You had said that where had we heard these words before? Whom did you say that mechazeret al pitchayhem was reminiscent of?
Begging.
Oh, begging.
Begging, yeah.
Yes, but it wasn't of a biblical character that we heard.
No. It's rabbinic. As far as I know, it's more rabbinic language than
Got it. Okay. I was wondering if maybe they were picking up on the fact that lachazor al peh is something that we've seen before. That would be very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. But okay, it's an expression.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And so I think, just to point out like just two things of all the things I just said about this midrash that I really like is one is that it really really draws out that there's a lot of silence around this experience, so much so that she imagines that her suffering is normal and has to go beg people for information, and then also her real loneliness in it is hard. It's very sad. The Ibn Ezra takes this midrash, but in a different way. So he uses really the exact same language, but he says, he shall tell nashim shall do imira lahem kacha, but vatomarna lo. He imagines. She asked all these women, do they have the same experience? And they all said, no, we did not have the same experience. So in the midrash, it's her saying, oh my gosh, did you have this experience? Like you must have. Why is this worth it to anyone? Whereas for Ibn Ezra, it's actually, no, did this happen to you? And they said no. And then she says, Vatam Vatomer and Cain. So if Adavar minhag, right? If this is not normal, lamaza anochi beharayon mishuna. What did I do that I'm in this messed up, abnormal pregnancy? So that's how Ibn Ezra fills in the Vatomer and Cain. Lamaza anochi in such a screwed up pregnancy. Like why is this unique to me? And the Sforno goes back to Rashi, but twists it. So Rashi said, what lamaza anochi I think his language was mitava mitpalelet al harayon, right? Like why did I so desire pregnancy? And the Sforno says, no. Lama zehit avu krovai. Why did all my relatives want this? Sheya ani im hazara. Why did they want this for me to be the mother of the seed of Isaac? But Umram ati la fear vava. Maybe you who will be the source of miracles. Myriads. V'chin ba'ali shi palal alai bazad. Why did my husband daven for this for me? So for this goes back, I think, to the loneliness. Like, everyone talks about pregnancy in the abstract, and they all said, this is something we want for you. And you know, like, how do you learn what you're supposed to want for yourself? It's often what other people kind of tell you you're supposed to want, or what other people, I want to give you a bracha that, and when people, you know, if the bracha is achutenu ahil al fear vava, then you're like, yeah, kini hiraton, you know, like I definitely want to have 1 million children. But she's looking back and saying, oh, like, what a bracha that I should suffer and be miserable and be crushed from the inside. Like, that's not a bracha. I thought you were giving me a bracha. And it's not here. It's not just loneliness. It's like I was being misled, neglected, used. I think there's something really, really, like, on the nose about this Sforno, in that when we said, right, Be'atar Yitzchak le'nochach isho, it's not her davening for her own pregnancy, it's him davening for her, and everyone else gives her a bracha, you should have kids. She's like, I'm not sure I wanted this. Why did everyone want this for me? And really pointing out that textual thing where it's other people pushing for it for her. I'll just give it a moment in case anyone has thoughts on that. Okay. I can't tell if Zella is about to chime in or not.
I am sorry.
Okay, great. Okay.
We have such a different conception of family and childbirth, and I mean, women, for us, it's not important what it is for us right now. For what it was in the ancient world, a woman without a child was like, shh. I don't think it ever occurred to them to think, oh, do I really want to become pregnant? Do I really want to be a mother? You are just the lowest of the low if you were a woman without a child. So I think that should be kind of an overriding idea. And the idea of her questioning the decision to have a child, I'm not sure I can see that at all. I think she's wondering, like, what is clearly going on with me that's different? And that is probably her question when she goes to inquire. And that's why she does get this answer, like, okay, it's because you're having twins. And by the way, I'll tell you about those twins. But this thing about questioning whether she should have a child or not, I don't think that's real for, you know, or realistic for that time period.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say about that is, like, I don't know how different things were in the time periods of Rashi and Sforno, and they're willing to imagine it, you know?
No, I think by that time it was different, and that yes, they're not, you know, that close to our, well, maybe they are closer to our world. I think it really was by that time a different conception.
But like women couldn't own property. They, you know, like all the mostly Jewish inheritance laws were, from what I know at least, and were like in play in the Jewish communities at those times. So yeah, I don't know.
Zella, I just think she was so conflicted and agonizing because she thought this was something that she wanted. She prayed for it for 20 years. And then now she finally has it, and she doesn't know what to, it's
Can't
not that she,
breathe.
yeah, it's not that she doesn't, like, all of a sudden she doesn't want this child anymore, but she just can't figure this whole thing out because on the one hand, yes, she wants to live up to what you were saying. She doesn't want to be akara. She wants to be one of those women who has a child and not looked down upon. But she is suffering so badly and she's just agonizing over this whole situation.
This wasn't what she had envisioned.
Yeah.
And I also imagine that at that time there was danger connected with pregnancy.
Always.
Absolutely.
And that people would
100%.
know about it.
100%.
And that they all knew about, and that haunted her too when she's feeling such tremendous pains. So I hear what you said.
And we're going to
before,
come back
that,
to death in 1 second also. Yeah, just so you
okay,
know.
that the answer that she received was not on point, let's say. But I think to an existential question, and when she's thinking about her mortality, I think it is a good answer. Like, yes, you are suffering right now, but it's for a purpose that's far greater than you. I think that might have given her chizuk.
Yeah, we're going to see that in the Ramban also in a second. You're basically the Ramban right now. Sandra, yeah.
Let's see if I have did I unmute?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay. I find it so amazing that the Chumash puts her feelings right here on paper when it leaves out so much about everybody else's feelings. I mean, we have so many questions about Moshe. We have so many questions about all the imahot also. But right here, the dangers, the fraught nature, the terror, the uncertainty, the future. I mean, every possible existential fear, worry, and hope is crammed into these 3-4 psukim, and it's a very
one pasuk.
very that's right. So it's just amazing that the authors chose to put this in, and it's marvelous. It's marvelous. I think we have to be aware of that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I'm here for also. Absolutely. Everything you said. Okay, let's look. I know we're running low on time and I still have 2 more things I want to show you. So I'll just show you the Ramban really quickly. The Ramban takes this to the greatest extreme of anyone here. He quotes Rashi and Ibn Ezra, so we'll skip that obviously. But here's where he says, Hanachon be'inai, the correct interpretation in my opinion, if you're following the English word down here, Ki amra im kiniyali lamazanochi ba'olam. She says, like, the correct interpretation in my eyes is what she says, if it shall be so with me, why am I in the world? Halavai eineni, would that I were not in the world. She'amut o shelo hayiti, that I should die or that I should never have been at all. And then he quotes a pasuk from Eov, similar to the pasuk that says, I should have been as though I had not been. Kasher lo hayiti ahaya. So this is very intense. The Ramban's interpretation. The Ramban's interpretation is that Rivka is suffering not just from physical pain, but from intense perinatal depression. Which is also extremely real, under discussed, and crushing, emotionally crushing. And that's the Ramban's. That's the Ramban's interpretation. The Ramban, by the way, is on team. She went to Hashem. That she davened. Lo matzati drisha etzel Hashem rak lehipalel. Right, Darashti et Hashem va'anani. Okay, very nice. And then what is this answer to her? The Ramban says, Hodia la shelo tifachid. Told her the future so that she didn't have to be afraid. Right? This is when she learned she's having twins. There's no ultrasound. She didn't know what it was happeing. You're gonna have twins. This rushing in her stomach. Right? Maybe she didn't even know she was pregnant, suggests the Ramban. you're pregnant with twins, that's what's happening. Okay, and your twins are these two warring nations right from the beginning of their creation. But that's what's going to happen to them at the end. But the Ramban reads into the psukim somehow. But now these two twins are going to rest. And she'll be able to find rest and quiet for herself. So the Ramban somehow understands that this midrash not only provides her with very important information, you're pregnant, it's twins, like that's almost the most important piece of information. The rest of the prophecy, take it or leave it, but that's the important thing that she didn't know. And the Ramban understands that after the prophecy, they stop being nearly as crushing, and she is able to find a little bit of calm. The other thing I would say in terms of that question of like, how does the prophecy actually answer her issues? Sometimes when you know what's happening with your body and then you stop panicking about it, it hurts less. You know, like if you think you're in Libra, then the contractions really hurt, but the minute you find out it's Braxton Hicks, you're like, I'm okay actually. Right, just like hurts a little bit less. You're actually more functional than you thought you were, and that actually, you know, the connection between mind and body and anxiety and pain is very close. And I think that the Ramban's kind of getting at that as well. I know we're at time. I just want to say one super quick thing, and then I'm happy to stick around for a minute if people have other thoughts. The other main place where our tradition talks about pregnancy is on Tazria. Tazria, we have, right, Isha ki Tazria v'yalda zachar, a woman conceives, bears a man. It seems the same as all the Vatar, Vatiled, but the Midrash and Vayikra Rabbah uses that as its like main home for all of its fun, amazing midrashim about pregnancy. I'll try and sign up for Tazria so we can look at those inside together. But just, you know, like you can just see, right? A person who has a purse full of coins, do they hold the opening at the top, or do you hold the opening at the bottom? You know, like that kind of discussion about pregnancy. And it's really fun and really great. All these rabbis looking at the physiology of pregnancy and being like, this is insane. And just one thing I want to point out is that it's kind of amazing that they choose Tazria and not Rivka's pregnancy as the place to have that conversation. Because looking at a woman who's suffering the way Rivka does and being like, but pregnancy is so cool, is really inappropriate. And I think it's something that people really experience quite often. And our tradition doesn't do it. When you want to say pregnancy is so cool, do it in the biology textbook that is Sefer Vayikra, and not for the person who is Rivka with her own real experiences and her own real suffering. And when we're confronted with a person with real experiences and real suffering, what we're trying to do is figure out how to help them. How can we understand what's really bothering you, and how can we address it? And we see HaKadosh Baruch Hu doing that, right? Rivka suffering, and she calls out to God, and God answers immediately, which is a really wonderful and important model also. So thank you all, and I'm happy to stick around for a minute if people have more thoughts, and otherwise Evie can tell you about some other fun things happening at Trisha.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let me just double check that we don't have no questions on Facebook. Okay, thank you so much, Rabbanit Sarna, and thank you everyone who joined us here today and also shared from their own experience. Note that this class will not meet next Thursday in observance of Thanksgiving. We'll resume the following Thursday, November 30th, and I'm looking forward to seeing you then. 2 new classes that are starting after Thanksgiving to note: Hanukkah, Holiday of Home Buddies, on Tuesday, November 28th at 8 p.m. with Rabbanit Sarna, and also Technologies of Transmission on Wednesday, November 29th at 8 p.m. with Rabbanit Sarah Wickenfeld. Also, just a note, if you generally are joining Rabbi Helfgott's, I hope I pronounced the name right, class Between Heaven and Earth, Just note that the class is not meeting this Monday, November 20th, so just adjust your calendar accordingly. All the class schedules and all the information is available on our website, 5784.drisha.org/fall. And I'm looking forward to seeing you. We have another class coming up. If you're joining our next class today, just a reminder that there's only about less than a half an hour break between the classes. So hopefully I'll see you soon. Okay, lehitraot.